Two.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. We're just waiting for everyone to connect and then we'll begin. So like in a minute or so.
Good morning, everybody.
All righty, so welcome everyone to our workshop. Today's workshop is from bugs to textiles to robots, and it will be hosted by DIDI Professor Carlos Montana. Before we begin, we're going to show a short video and then Carlos will start the workshop.
No great thing, no beautiful invention happened just like that. It happens when we leave our comfort zone and embrace change, creativity, and out of the ordinary. We live in interesting times. We live in a world that's constantly asking questions, that's constantly changing. In a world where blockchain and robots will be the norm, where 85% of tomorrow's jobs don't exist yet, where being multi-skilled is not just celebrated, but essential. At Dubai Institute of Design and Innovation, we believe that we need to prepare you for the future, to teach you skills that will power your tomorrow. Today, design matters more than ever. But how can design help, you may ask? We combine disciplines so you become well-rounded. From product design, multimedia design, fashion design, strategic design management, it's where you will learn how to merge different design disciplines. Presenting a 4-year Bachelor of Design degree in collaboration with MIT and Parsons' new School of Design. DIDI, not just another design university.
All right, Carlos, over to you.
Thank you. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Can you all hear me well? One or two people say yes?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Okay. I'm just going to stop my video. Okay. So welcome to today's workshop, from bugs to textiles to robots. Basically, we will be talking about innovation inspired by nature. I'm Carlos Montaña, and I'm an associate professor of DIDI. I've been here since we started 2 years ago. I was the first professor to arrive, and it's really my honor. And we're very happy to have you here sharing with us this time. And I hope that the talk today and the images that we will show, the projects that we will show, and the discussions that we will have really help you think about so many possibilities that design and innovation has. So let's start. If it works, give me a second. Okay. So first of all, I would like you all to get a piece of paper and some pencils or pens, because the whole idea is that in this workshop we will do what we're often told not to do, either in classes or in conferences. We're usually told, oh, you should pay attention and nothing else. Don't talk, don't draw, don't do anything else. Well, here I actually want you to draw, because one of the beauties of design is that while we're seeing different things, while we're experiencing different things, we actually are inspired to design, and we are inspired maybe to invent new things. So I'm going to ask you to draw while I talk and while we see some of the projects. And also, it will be very boring if it's just me talking and talking a lot. So I will also ask some questions, and I really hope that many of you will participate. And we have a design challenge. So while we have this talk and while we have this workshop, I want you to think about this design challenge, do some sketches, some drawings about your ideas, and then at the end of the presentation, we'll give you a website where you will be able to an email, sorry, where you will be able to share your drawings and ideas with us. So the design challenge is this one. Imagine and draw how we will colonize outer space in the future. And probably maybe many of you know that one of the big industries nowadays, and one of the industries that is developing the most, is the space industry. And it's, well, very important nowadays in the UAE, because recently the mission to Mars from the UAE was launched, and it was just 6 years in the making, and we're all very proud of this. But also we're seeing that more and more, many different companies and many entrepreneurs and pioneers are looking at how to explore outer space. So commercial space travel is becoming a reality, and we see this with companies by Elon Musk and by many others that are trying to colonize outer space. And probably in the future we will be living in Mars or establishing some colonies in Mars or so on. And there are many challenges to go to outer space. How will we grow food? How will we produce our materials? How will we construct our buildings? There are many, many questions that we need to ask ourselves when we think about colonizing space. So again, please keep your imagination wild. Please play with your imagination and take your papers and pencils and be inspired while we talk. Think about the bugs, textiles, and robots that we're going to discuss, and design your own ideas of how we will colonize outer space in the future. So let's start with a short video. This is a proposal by Foster and Partners, and it's one of the most important architecture firms in the world. And they are thinking, how could we build in Mars? How could we build in the moon? How could we colonize space? So let's see what some of their proposals are.
Planet Earth is protected by the atmosphere, the layer of air and gas that surrounds it. The atmosphere shields the Earth from solar radiation, keeps the temperature balanced, and protects us from meteoroids. On the Moon's south pole, you can see almost perpetual sunlight on the horizon. This is the site of our lunar base. Conditions on the Moon are very different from those on Earth. Because the Moon has no atmosphere, there is no protection from solar radiation. There are extreme temperature fluctuations, and there is no protection from gamma radiation, and no protection from meteoroids. The lunar lander has detached from the rocket launch and is on a course to Shackleton's crater, the Moon's south pole. Inside the lander is a cylinder which contains an inflatable dome and 2 robot 3D printers. After the cylinder containing the habitation capsule has been unloaded, a dome is inflated from one end. This provides the support structure for construction, a little like scaffolding is used to build on Earth. The lunar habitation is built by a robot-operated 3D printer. At one end, it has a scoop to collect the regolith. In the center are the containers for the printing material. At the other end, there is a robotic arm with a printing head. The robot collects regolith from the Moon's surface. Layers of this moon dust are built up over the dome to create the protective shell. This process takes about 3 Earth months. The shell is made up of a hollow, closed cellular structure. Under a microscope, it would look very similar to the close-up of a bird's bone. Like a bone, it is light and incredibly strong at the same time. When the lunar base is complete, it can house 4 people. Inside the dome, they are protected from meteorites, gamma radiation, and high temperature fluctuations. The original capsule functions as an airlock and technical support module. The skylights draw daylight into the living and workspaces, which are sheltered within a pressurized enclosure. This method is a pioneering advance in space-age construction. At Foster & Partners, we're used to designing for some of the world's most extreme climates. We often use materials found locally to create sustainable buildings on Earth. While the Moon is an exciting new territory for architecture, the value of this logic endures.
Okay, so let me ask a question about the video. Can somebody tell me what is interesting about the structure of the dome? Hello? Nilavu, yes?
I'd say the structure of the dome is interesting because as the, I guess, sand or something is being piled on, it looks not proportioned, I guess. Like, that's my statement.
Sorry, Nilavu, your sound was a bit choppy, so I couldn't quite get it. Sorry for that. If you want to repeat.
Yeah, I'll repeat it. So what I think is that the dome is not as in a perfect circle. It's very misshaped, I guess. It has bumps and stuff like that.
Okay, thank you. Yes, that's actually a good observation. And those are some of the most rigid structures that we can find. And also, we could also compare it with eggs. And the eggshells are some of the most interesting structures that we find in nature also. But there was a specific comment about what inspired the internal structure of the dome. Can somebody remember this, or did somebody get it?
Sir, can I?
Yes, yes, sure.
Yeah. Sir, about the structure of the dome actually doesn't matter because the designers of this project have protected they have given it such a design that the dome has been protected from solar radiation. So I don't think the shape really whether it's really should be circled, it doesn't matter as long as it's protected. And it's a really good project because they have also looked at the safety and protection of the people who are going to live inside.
Okay, thank you very much for that comment. I think it's interesting to understand that the main objective is the use and the protection of people and creating this environment. But I would argue that the shape of the dome is very important. And the material in which the dome is constructed is also very important. But one of the details that they spoke about very quickly was that the initial structure was based on the structure of the bones in birds. And this is very important because bird bones are very lightweight because they need to fly. And if we imitate structures like the bird bones, then we can achieve structures that use very little materials, that are very lightweight, and with which we can construct these domes. And then they would cover this initial structure with the regolith, which is a material, a resource that is found in the planet. So there's very important elements here that we need to think about when we talk about space colonization. So let's continue and hear a bit of a warning, a disclaimer. Creepy bugs coming soon. So if any of you is a bit afraid of insects, spiders, and so on, arachnophobia, please consider closing your eyes because we will have some very creepy creatures coming. And let's talk about this little bug. Who can tell me something about this picture? What do we see here?
Sir, can I?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So here we see a spider, and the spider, actually a fact about the spiders are they construct their web in such a way that it's comfortable for them to move and catch their prey very easily because the web is also very sticky and they can move very freely in their 8 feet.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes, fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
What else can we learn from spiders and spider webs? Somebody else?
They are symmetrical.
There's some symmetry sometimes, or asymmetry, depending on the type of spider web. Yes, actually, if we think of it in terms of a design structures, there are radial composition, which means that it has certain radii and it's constructed around that. What else? Nilavu?
Can I say something?
Yes, please.
Like how they designed this spider web, like it's so difficult on them. It's too small.
Sir, can I say something?
Yes, please.
Yes, so there's also one known fact about spiders is that they direct their web towards the sunlight to catch more heat during the cold days, and then when it's summer, they direct it away from sunlight.
Yes, actually, there are many, many interesting facts about spiders and spider webs. But well, some of the most important, yes, spiders are living creatures and they make their webs from silk. And this silk is made from proteins. And all of this is natural, it is biodegradable, it's made with water, it's made at room temperature, unlike how we do things. So in industrial processes, when we make textiles, we use harsh chemicals, we use very high temperatures, we use a lot of heat to produce textiles. While in nature, and many animals, many insects, they produce many textiles that are actually super efficient with materials that are easily available and easily producible. Now, interestingly, the spider web is amazingly thin, but it's really, really strong. And some spider webs are actually stronger than steel. And it's 50 times lighter than steel. So really a spider web is a fantastic structure. It is made with natural renewable resources and it serves many purposes. So through the spider web, the spider can sense movement, can trap its prey. It's really a very, very interesting design in nature. So here we have some bugs and some textiles, but let's look at some robots. So what do we see here?
So can I say?
Yes, please.
To me, I see like a model, a remote controlled model of a spider.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, that's it. It's a remote controlled model or a remote controlled toy, a robot of a spider. Now,
yes.
in some cases, we just imitate, let's say, the form of a spider when we're making a toy because it's fun or because it can look creepy or because we could use it for Halloween. But in many other cases, many scientists use how the spider walks to be inspired. And they actually study how the different legs move and how the spider crawls to be able to develop robots that are more efficient. So in this case, it's probably just a toy that we could build with Arduino, and it's something that we actually do at DIDI, and I will show you later. But in more advanced cases, we could use this imitation of spiders to develop, for example, robots that can enter very difficult places after disasters, after earthquakes, and so on. So just to say that we can imitate nature in many different ways. Now let's look at another little bug. Who knows what this little bug is and what it's actually doing?
Can I? On. Okay, so I think the bug had I think it's a spider. It had set a trap. So I think when the prey came, it had caught it.
Okay, thank you. It's a good guess, but it's actually not a spider. I'll give you a little tip. It's an ant. So somebody else would like to, yeah, Gautam raised his hand, his or her hand, yes?
Is it a weaver ant?
Yes.
It's a weaver ant.
It's a weaver ant. So what is interesting about weaver ants?
Is it feeding on cactus?
They feed on different elements, but they actually grow their food. They grow some fungi to be able to feed themselves and feed the colonies. But actually, if you look at this image, you will see that the ant has a little larvae, like a white element. It's actually the equivalent of 3D printing. So what the ant is doing is that she's squeezing this larvae, and the larvae is producing this silk like glue. And what this ants do is that they actually use several leaves in a tree. They connect them with this silk. That's why they're called weaver ants, because they weave this cocoon and they build their nest like this. And
It's
also,
like nearly to a spider, but different way.
yes, yes, exactly. Similar to the spider. And again, we have many different examples in insects, but in this case, it's also using the surroundings. And not only that, but ants live in colonies. And these colonies are very interesting too, because they're highly organized, they're cooperative, and they have very intricate techniques to communicate themselves. And this is what scientists call swarm intelligence. So the interesting thing here is that we as people, we as designers, we as innovators could look at some of these examples in nature and develop some of our innovations based on that. So what if we can 3D print our buildings and our houses, and they're not just 3D printing with certain material, but they actually use the surrounding elements in the environment for this, like the weaver ant, and that is in a way similar to what we saw in the video for the architecture in the moon. Or what if, for example, we imitate how these ants behave and walk and communicate with each other to gather food, and we develop some robots that are intelligent and they can communicate with each other. Or we use that sort of artificial intelligence to guide our autonomous vehicles so they don't crash to each other. And that's part of what we're talking about, this whole idea of imitating nature. And this is called biomimicry. It has many different names: biomechanics, biomimetics, biomimicry. One of the ones that I prefer is biomimicry, and it was coined in 1997 by Janine Benyus, and it comes from the Greek bios, life, and mimesis, imitation. And she wrote a book, Innovation Inspired by Nature, very, very important. And I actually, when I read the book and I was very inspired, I met her and I did my PhD around it. And I also wrote a book about biomimicry in industrial design for sustainability. Now, the interesting element of biomimicry is that it uses nature as model, measure, and mentor. So it's about imitating nature at different levels. Here we see this bird. It's actually a native bird from New Zealand, very exotic. But what is interesting about the picture? What else is interesting about the picture?
It's camouflaged with the environment.
Yes, 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 it's camouflaged. It seems to blend with its environment. Okay, so this is a survival technique in nature, and actually we use it a lot as human beings. We use camouflage for the military to blend with the terrain, the environment, but it also makes us think that one of the interesting aspects of biomimicry is to use nature as measure. So biomimicry uses an ecological standard to judge the rightness of our innovations. It means that in biomimicry, we think that it's important to respect nature. And that is why biomimicry is also related to ecological design or environmentally friendly design, and also to sustainability. It is about respecting the limits of nature and blending or merging with nature. There are different levels of biomimicry. So what Janine Benyus calls shallow biomimicry, and it's basically the simplest way of biomimicry, imitating form or imitating function, like the examples of the spider that we saw and the robots. But what is more interesting and a bit more difficult and complex is imitating processes and imitating ecosystems from nature. So yes, in a way, the spider that we saw, the little robot or the toy, it imitates the form of the spider, or it could also imitate the function of the spider and how it walks and crawls. But for example, in this case, it's even more interesting if we imitate the process of the swarm intelligence. or if we could develop an ecosystem where both the environment and the elements in it coexist. This is also part of my research where I try to visualize from the Industrial Revolution to the early 2000s, what were possibly some examples of these types of imitation of nature. So in the upper band, we see designs, basically industrial designs or product designs, where we have form inspired by nature. Then in the middle band, we have function inspired by nature, and this is usually related to technology, robotics, medical inventions, and then the idea of processes and systems from nature. And this usually has to do more with bio-inspired theories, with urban planning, with new industrial paradigms. So just very quickly to give some examples, we have at the left side of this image, we have the arts and crafts movement in the 1900s, where the designers and craftsmen were very inspired in nature, but in this case, it was very decorative. So designing jewelry or furniture that would look like leaves or like insects or so on. Then we moved to the Art Deco period. Afterwards, we have the organicism of the 1950s. And then in the 1980s, we have what some theorists, what some researchers call the blobjects. And it's all these products that look like little blobs or little creatures. In terms of function, inspired by nature, there's a lot of very, very good examples. So barbed wire, basically imitating plants with thorns, cactus, and so on, or even the whole history of aviation. It was in part inspired by the study of birds. Robotics is very important here. The cat eyes, prosthetic devices, artificial hearts, robots, and many others that we will see soon. And then in terms of processes and systems from nature, we have a whole mindset or a whole thinking about systems in nature. So in many cases, for example, in the early 1900s, the first garden city, where cities were starting to incorporate, again, nature as big gardens. We have in the 1950s, movements like the metabolic or symbiotic architecture by Kisho Kurokawa in Japan, where we compare a building with a metabolism, with an organism and all its functions. Afterwards, we have what is called urban metabolism, urban ecology, industrial ecology, and others. Now, another little question. Who can tell me what this is in the image? Any idea? Pardon?
Plants.
It is a plant. Yes, it is a plant. It's actually a seed. What else?
Sir, can I speak on this?
Yes, please.
So I think this is basically the hooks. So these are actually, there was a story on which there was a man walking by, and I think his cloth or something got stuck to the plant we see. So I think that is when he combined the hooks and this, and so now we have shoes that have strapes. So when you close them together, they stick together really. Yeah, this. So that is when he got inspired by the hooks and this plant and the hooks getting together. So that is when he invented the hooks and the I don't know what you call it, but then yeah, that is how.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you very much. You basically told the story for me. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
The little seed is called a burr, and the little hooks are called barbels. And basically what's interesting here is that the little hooks attach to the fur of animals, to the hairs of the animals. And this is very important for the seeds because they need to travel. for the seeds. There's many different ways in which seeds spread. Some of the seeds fly, some of the seeds drop from the tree nearby the tree, but some seeds need to travel some more. So these specific seeds need to cling into animals to travel. And exactly that, the story that you just told, in 1941, George de Mestral was walking his dog in the woods, and he noticed that the dog was full of these little seeds. And then he started to analyze why this was happening, and saw all the, with a magnifying glass, saw all the little hooks in the seed. And that's how he invented Velcro. And Velcro is one of these materials that we use nowadays in our wallets, in our backpacks, in our shoes, everywhere. It's really a very important invention that comes from biomimicry, from understanding nature. Okay, who can guess what this drawing or this image is?
Bird's body.
A bird's body? Not quite, but good guess.
It's a fish.
Animal skin.
It's an animal skin. Yes, it's an animal skin. It's not a fish, but it lives in water. They look like scales, yes. But it's actually, when we see it through a microscope, if we see the animal, which lives in water and is a very good swimmer, we would think the skin is actually very soft. But when we look into the microscope, we see these structures. Yes?
Is it fish scales?
Not fish scales. It's actually the structure of the shark's skin. It's shark skin. And very interestingly, the shark is one of the fastest swimmers in nature. And we would think that his skin is like the dolphin skin, very smooth and very flat, but that's actually not true. The skin has all these little structures, and this actually helps to reduce the drag and make the shark a more efficient swimmer. And guess what? People studied the shark skin and studied this material and this structure, and the fast skin swimming suit was developed in 2000 by Speedo. So basically, by looking at the structure of the shark skin, they developed this material that has a similar structure, and it basically helps you glide faster through the water. And it was so efficient that in the Olympics, these swimming suits were banned because they were giving a big advantage to the swimmers that were wearing it over the swimmers that were not wearing the suit. So again, a very interesting innovation inspired by nature. And a final one. What is this, and what do you think it has inspired?
A gecko feet.
Yes, gecko feet. And what do gecko feet inspire? Well, actually, gecko feet inspire many, many different applications and innovations, including textiles and including robots. So this is just a little application. The robot itself is inspired in the gecko and in the walking movement of the gecko to crawl. And it could be a robot that can be used, for example, to clean windows outside buildings, or many, many different applications. But if you look at the feet, there's actually some blue pads. They are made of gecko tape. So gecko tape is another very important invention, and it's a sticky tape that is very strong and very powerful, but it actually has no chemicals. It doesn't have any glue that could be, well, that could evaporate or lose its qualities during time. The gecko tape is actually a tape that sticks to different materials because of its nanostructure, because of the structure of the tape itself. So basically, this is just to say that understanding nature and biology can help us to design and innovate. And many, many people, when I give these talks, some people would ask, well, why would designers study biology? We're not into nature. We're studying design because we like art and because we like to draw and because we like technology, but not because we like biology. But that's not true. Understanding nature and biology can be a really, really powerful tool to be better designers and to develop new inventions and new innovations. And just a reminder, please continue drawing. Think of the bugs, textiles, and robots and other interesting creatures that we are seeing, and try to imagine how we could use some of these ideas to live in Mars, or to travel to Mars, or to have fun in Mars. Think about all the things that we do during our life and how we would do them, and how we can learn from nature to develop some of these ideas to live in other planets. So this is a short video which summarizes some of the ideas around biomimicry.
In 1989, Japan's Shinkansen bullet train had a problem. It was fast, really fast, like pushing 170 miles per hour fast. But every time it exited a tunnel, it was loud. The noise was coming from a variety of sources, but whenever a train sped into a tunnel, it pushed waves of atmospheric pressure through the other end. The air exited tunnels with a sonic boom that could be heard 400 meters away. In dense residential areas, that was a huge problem. So an engineering team was brought in to design a quieter, faster, and more efficient train. And they had one secret weapon. Eiji Nakatsu, the general manager of the technical development department, was a bird watcher.
Different components of the redesigned bullet train were based on different birds. Owls inspired the pantograph. That's the rig that connects the train to the electric wires above. Nakatsu modeled the redesign after their feathers, reducing noise by using the same serrations and curvature that allow them to silently swoop down to catch prey. The Adelie penguin, whose smooth body allows it to swim and slide effortlessly, inspired the pantograph's supporting shaft, redesigned for lower wind resistance. And perhaps most notable of all was the kingfisher.
The kingfisher is a bird that dives into water to catch its prey. The unique shape of its beak allows it to do that while barely making a splash. Nakatsu took that shape to the design table. The team shot bullets shaped like different train nose models down a pipe to measure pressure waves and dropped them into water to measure the splash size. The quietest nose design was the one modeled most closely after the kingfisher's beak. When the redesign debuted in 1997, it was 10% faster, used 15% less electricity, and stayed under the 70 decibel noise limit in residential areas. And it did all that with the wings of an owl, the belly of a penguin, and the nose of a kingfisher. There's a name for design like this. It's called biomimicry.
The people who design our world usually never take a biology class, believe it or not. So they're novices in how the world works.
That's Janine Benyus. Back in 1997, she wrote the book that coined the term biomimicry. It told the story of the innovations in computing, energy, and health that were inspired by structures in the natural world.
Stick like a gecko, compute like a cell, even run a business like a redwood forest.
Benyus has since worked as a consultant for various companies, trying to get them to understand how to take design ideas from nature. That might mean studying prairie dog burrows to build better air ventilation systems, mimicking shark skin to create bacteria-resistant plastic surfaces for hospitals, or arranging wind turbines in the same drag-reducing pattern that schools of fish swim in. Designers get inspiration from a lot of different places, but Benyus thinks many of them could benefit from looking more at the natural world.
So there's a lot of sort of looking at what other people have done, and what they do is they look at all the others and they get ideas. They literally do, you know, a lot of designers have lots of magazines that they look through. They tear those out and they put them on inspiration boards. But they're looking at other human technologies.
Her idea was simple. Designers should get in the habit of bringing a biologist to the table and let them help solve problems by mimicking nature. And there are three main ways they can do that.
You know, you can mimic its form or its shape. You might create a paint for a building that when it dries, it's got the same structure as self-cleaning leaves. Lotus leaves are notoriously great. They let rainwater clean the leaf because they have these bumps, and the rainwater balls up on the bumps and then it pearls away the dirt. So that lotus effect is physical, and you can create a physical structure on the outside of any product. Imagine that on the outside of your car. Rainwater would clean your car. So that's mimicking form. But there's also mimicking process, the processes in the natural world. It might even be, you know, how you mimic how ants communicate in order to efficiently find sources of food or new places to live. And those processes, that self-organization, has been mimicked in software. You know, in things like, autonomous cars and how they're going to move in flocks through the city by talking to one another. That's mimicking nature's process. And then you jump up to the level of mimicking whole ecosystems, right? There's a thing that's a buzzword right now that's really hot called the circular economy, which is essentially, you know, industry saying, you know, there should be no such thing as a byproduct in our manufacturing facility that goes to landfill. It should be used by something else, right? And at the end of a product's life, that product should be upcycled into something else. It's being called the circular economy. Ecosystems do that really, really, really well. You've got a log on the forest floor, and those materials move up into the body of the fungus that eats it. Those materials move up into a mouse, and that mouse material moves up into a hawk, right? And if you think about that as what we'd like to do with local materials being upcycled constantly in our cities, for instance, those ecosystem lessons are really big for us.
And that's the end goal for biomimetic design, making products, systems, and cities functionally indistinguishable from the natural world. Life has been around on Earth for 3.8 billion years, and what designers are starting to realize is that is a lot of research and development time.
The people who design our world have a lot to learn from the natural world. All they have to do is take a look.
Thank you so much for watching this.
Okay, so here we talked about biomimicry, or being inspired by nature. But nowadays there's even more interesting movements where it's not just about imitating nature, but it's how can we enhance nature, or how can we merge technology and nature. And we have movements like Next Nature, which basically says that nature is not separated from technology anymore, but it's actually blended. And we also have movements like Bio-Design, where biological elements are incorporated into technological elements and vice versa to create new innovations. And this is happening at many, many different levels. So let's look at some of these designs and innovations according to some topics. So let's look, for example, of designs and innovations that grow. And again, a quick reminder, please continue drawing, and please apply what we're discussing to develop ideas to live in outer space, or to colonize outer space, or live in Mars. So we have experiments like the plantoids. Usually when we think of robots, we think about the robots that we saw earlier, the Aibo that looks like a dog, or the little robot that moves like a spider. But a research group in Italy thought that it would be very interesting to understand how plants grow and develop robots that grow like plants. So this is in a way a new way of understanding robotics, not just how, let's say, animals move, but the idea of moving by growing. And in this case, it's also using 3D printing and imagining that these mechanical roots are 3D printed and they grow, and they could have several applications, including applications in space colonization. For example, to develop new structures for architecture, different applications. This is another example which we could say is more related to art, and but it's also inspired by growth in nature. It's a project by a group called Nervous System in 2014, which created a series of kinetic sculptures that illustrate growth processes. And if we look at some of these sculptures or some of these moving images, basically we could think about corral or branching in leaves and in trees, different elements from nature. But growth is very, very important, and there's different patterns and different solutions for growth. In this case, these sculptures are basically a series of 3D printed elements which rotate and create this idea of movement, the same way in which we create animated movies. And architecture is full of examples of people that are playing with new materials or experimenting with new materials and new construction technologies. This is a project called Bioscaffold by Natalie Almina. And the whole idea here was, how could we allow our buildings to grow, adapt, and self-repair? So if we think of buildings nowadays that are made with bricks or with glass or with mortar, there's basically an earthquake and they crumble down, or they cannot be, or they need to be repaired or torn down and repaired. But what if we could develop buildings like living organisms that could self-heal like bone, for example? So how could we integrate 3D printing elements with natural materials, biomaterials, to create these structures that grow and self-repair? Another interesting example is the Urban Algae Folly by Ecologic Studio. And this project is basically a pavilion that has a structure that has living microalgae, the green elements that you see there. And the interesting part of this project is that with the heat and with the sun, the algae grows rapidly. So the more sun there is, the more algae grows, and this creates a shade. So this could be a potential solution for future architectural skins and architecture buildings. Another very important area of study in biodesign is the idea of developing biomaterials. Growing biomaterials is very important. We know that many materials that we use nowadays are very toxic, or we're depleting our resources, especially with oil-based materials, plastics, and others. But what if we could grow our own materials? So many people are experimenting, growing fungi, growing different types of materials that we can use in different ways. One of the materials that is being most studied is mycelium, which is a fungus, for example, developing mycotex. It's actually like growing textiles or leather-like materials from mushrooms. And this is the work from Suzanne Lee, who has been doing these experiments from a long time ago with her company Biofabricate, and developing fashion and fashionable items grown with this material. Now let's look at designs and innovations that adapt. So this robot is a very interesting robot because it basically adapts to different conditions, and it basically adapts to accidents. So one of the problems with robots and with machines is that if a part breaks, usually the whole machine breaks down or doesn't work. But this robot has an algorithm and an artificial intelligence that if one of the legs breaks, it can actually redesign its walking way to be able to continue walking and moving, even if it doesn't have all the legs working with it. And if you think of it, the applications of this are amazing in the future. Many different adaptive textiles and folding structures that in some cases are used, for example, for clothing that controls our temperature. So this is an adaptive textile developed in MIT. And basically with the sweat and the heat, the textile opens up to allow ventilation. And when it's cold, it closes down. Or some of the adaptive skins that have been used in architecture, and especially to control ventilation and the shading, to naturally control the temperature of the buildings. We have many designs and innovations that move, and here robotics plays a very interesting role. If you check Boston Dynamics, they are the developers of many of the very interesting walking robots that we see nowadays, and some of them look like dogs or like bulls or like different animals that can...
So even dinosaurs in the movies.
Pardon?
Dinosaurs in the movies.
Yes, yes, yes. Also in animatronics, there's many interesting robots to create those dinosaurs and to create all the special effects for the movies. But traditionally we think of robots like hard elements, like all metal and plastic, but there's also a very interesting field called soft robotics, where we looked at soft animals like jellyfish and different water creatures, and we look at how they move, how they crawl in different ways. And this is being applied into many different transportation systems, security systems, and so on. And finally, let's look at some of the current designs and innovations to colonize outer space. And again, please continue drawing. Please think about possibilities for living in Mars, and please send those drawings to the email that we will give you at the end of the talk.
Yeah.
Again, some more creepy bugs coming soon. So if you're really afraid of creepy bugs, consider closing your eyes, please.
Sir, can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Yes, sir. So actually, the world is depending on technology. So in the future, the robots and all, they will take over the jobs, like especially medical field and a lot of construction jobs. So what will, if we continue building more and more robots, it'll obviously take over the whole world. So what will we do that time, sir?
That's a very interesting question. Let's go back to the robots. And to answer a bit more that question, I really invite you to come to one of our open houses where we discuss the idea of the jobs of the future and which jobs will be replaced by machines, by robots, by artificial intelligence, and which jobs we think won't be replaced by machines. And in those terms, I think, and we at DIDI think that, of course, creativity and design will still be very much a human trait. Creative problem solving will be very important in the future, and understanding people's emotions, what we call also emotional design, will be very important. So we think that, yes, it's true that many technologies will replace many of our jobs, will replace many of the jobs that we do right now, but hopefully it will be for the good. And again, we need to think about what are those jobs that will not be replaced by technology or by robots, and how will we be able to do them better. And the other thing that we need to think is that, yes, maybe some of the let's say, harder jobs will be replaced, but there will also be new jobs. So probably, for example, in the case of some of these robots in transportation or digging for a construction, maybe some of the labor will be replaced, but we will need more people to control the robots, more people to program the robots, more people to plan the projects. So there will still be, I think, new jobs and more jobs developing. And that's what at DIDI we're trying to imagine. What will be those new jobs in the future, and how can we train our students to develop those jobs in the future? Does this answer your question?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
So let's go now to outer space and some of the applications in outer space. Yuck, this is a really ugly bug. Is it from outer space?
So this is a dust mite?
Almost, but not. It could look like a dust mite, but it isn't, but it's close. It's a tardigrade. It is a tardigrade. And what is interesting about a tardigrade?
Yeah, it can survive even the harshest conditions, and it can live the longest.
Yes, it's what we call an extremophile, or an organism that can live in extreme conditions. And actually this one is a multi-extremophile, so multiple extreme conditions. So this little creature, also called the water bear, can be frozen, it can survive in extreme heat, in extreme cold, in extreme dryness, with lack of oxygen, with radiation. It has been known that tardigrades have survived without water for 120 years, or freezing to minus 200 and something degrees, which is close to absolute zero, heated to 151 degrees Celsius. So they really, really are the big survivors in nature. And what's interesting here is that we, as designers, could look into tardigrades and try to better understand them and see how we can be inspired from them. And yes, probably the typical examples will be sources of inspiration, for example, for graphics. And we see the graphics in the t-shirt here, or the graphics in this comic where the tardigrade becomes a character, or even in movies. And here we see in this scene of a movie where the tardigrade is being analyzed in this screen. But we could also try to understand how these organisms can resist these extreme environments and try to apply some of these characteristics to live in outer space, to live in the moon, or to live in Mars. So maybe this could give us clues on developing wearables to live in Mars, for example. Now, another project, very interesting, is the Cascia growing a Mars boot. It's by Liz Cojalco and Italian Officina Corpusculi, Maurizio Montalti, a designer who's actually a friend of some of our faculty in DIDI. And the idea is very simple. In Mars, it's very energy consuming and very difficult to take a lot of things to Mars. So we cannot think that we will, in the space shuttle, we will take big structures or a lot of equipment to Mars, because it will occupy a lot of space. It will be very heavy. It will make the rocket consume more fuel. So we need to think about possibilities of growing products and growing our environments in Mars and in other planets. And here, what they explored was also, again, this material, the mycelium, the fungal mycelium spores, to grow boots in Mars. And of course, combined with some of the technologies that we use a lot nowadays, like 3D printing. NASA is also using robots to grow food in space. So these are projects from the University of Colorado, where they're trying to think how robots could help harvest food in other planets. Or a project by NASA, which is called myco-architecture. And it's basically, again, using mycelium, using this fungus that grows very easily to create habitats for the moon or for other planets. And basically the idea is that a turtle carries its own habitat. We cannot be like turtles carrying a very big, heavy shell. It's very reliable and protective, but it costs a lot of energy. It uses a lot of materials. So when we're thinking about outer space and when we're thinking about transporting habitats to outer space, we cannot think of turtles. We need to think in other ways. We need to imagine habitats that are made of lightweight materials, fibrous, porous materials, and materials that can be grown in the place, materials that can be easily repaired or self-repair in the place. And that's why NASA and many institutions around the world are thinking of these experiments like myco-architecture. One of the very interesting labs that is working on this is the MIT Mediated Media Lab, and one of the main researchers is Nettie Oxman, and I'll show you a short clip of how she bridges architecture, engineering, design, chemistry, physics into this idea of transdisciplinarity.
Welcome to The Next List. I'm Dr. Sanjay Gupta. I want to introduce you to a remarkable woman who defies definition. I want you to meet Nettie Oxman.
Nettie is an architect, an engineer, a designer, a scientist.
Nettie Oxman believes that we could one day, in the near future, 3D print our buildings.
I don't want to design a building as I have learned. I want to question what it means to design a building.
At her lab at MIT's Media Lab, she's experimenting with different printable materials, everything from concrete to silk.
That concrete can be many things. That concrete can become a transparent window.
Nettie is thinking about architecture and design in completely new ways. Her muse is nature, and her medium is the 3D printer.
Can you print DNA? Can you print with calcium? Can you make a building with calcium?
I'm Dr. Sanjay Gupta, and this is The Next List.
We're now at the MIT Media Lab. The Mediated Matter group is the group that I have founded when I arrived at the Media Lab as faculty.
Nettie came as a student in computation at the secondary master's level. We don't tend to hire our own. It's just a principle. But Nettie was so exceptional that when we had a big search for a position in the Media Lab, she came out on top, clearly excellent.
The Mediated Matter Research Group was founded 2 years ago as a design lab that's dedicated to exploring design that is inspired by the biological world and the natural world. How can we reinterpret 3D printing that generates or suggests a new design language that's informed by the environment? When you think about other systems in nature, one often thinks of the spider web. So the spiders are creatures of the environment that generate silk. And with that silk, they do lots of things. They create trailing routes, they capture their prey, they wrap their prey, they wrap their eggs. So they generate silk for various functions. So in a way, the spider is a kind of multi-material 3D printer. The spider itself is a kind of printing machine, only instead of printing plastics, it prints with silk. So the spider web is a form of architecture, but it is also a form of fabrication, and one cannot separate the spider web's form from the way in which it originated. Nature doesn't divide between the architect, the engineer, and the construction worker. These are processes that we're fascinated to explore.
Learning from nature is not new, but she can learn from what she sees in the growth of a tree, for example, or in the structure of the bone structure of an animal, and so on, and then take that into, kind of morph it into a set of designs.
The bark of certain trees in a northern climate might be made by nature to maximize the absorption of the sun. If you can understand that particular behavior and reproduce it, you might do a facade treatment for buildings in northern climates that maximizes the absorption of the sun. So in a way, she was trying to create a catalog of natural behaviors that could be reproduced to then be applied in many different industries.
If we're able to extract some of the
Sorry. Okay, that's enough. So one of the interesting things is that we might think, oh yes, this is something that can only be done in MIT or that can only be done by NASA. But that actually is not true. In DIDI, we are actually doing transdisciplinary design. We are doing bio-inspired designs, and we are doing bio-design, or we're thinking about how we blend design with technology to design the future. And well, yes, we incorporate curricula from MIT and Parsons, the new School of Design. So MIT being the #1 university for innovation in the world, and Parsons, the new School of Design, being the #1 design university in the world. And actually one of the courses, or many of the courses that we teach, come from MIT, and one of the courses is precisely Design Across Scales by Nettie Oxman, where we look into biology, we look into robotics, we look into many different fields and how we can merge them together to innovate. And these are only a few examples of projects developed by our students. So these two projects are developed by one of our students, Yang Kai, who came from China to study at DIDI. The one that looks a bit like a spider in pink and green was actually his design for a collaboration that we did with a furniture manufacturer. So his original intention was to design a chair like a spider. And then by looking at the possibilities of the legs, we saw that it could not only be a chair that was kind of decorative, but that it could work as one of these crawlers used for toddlers or for little babies when they're learning to walk. And he designed this device. And the other device that you see is actually his proposal for one of our studios, which is called Ele from Elephant. The project brief was basically to enhance the human senses through different products or objects. And he imagined this idea like of an elephant with 2 trunks or 2 noses, and how that would affect people's perception to be able to smell different things at the same time. Other projects that we develop, so here we see a little kangaroo, and it's basically a robot, a little robot. From the first year, we integrate robotics and coding and programming into our curriculum, and we use Arduino servos. And here we can see like how this little robot, what we call a pet robot, could interact with the environment and move. And on the other side, we see a project, A Whole New World, by Noor and Nayef, some of our students. And basically this was for the studio, and here they wanted to envision what could be skins for architecture, for buildings, that would open and close according to the temperature and would let both light and wind in and out to control the temperature. So they developed these panels, flexible panels that open automatically according to the temperature. This project was actually exhibited in the Global Grad Show here in the Dubai Design Week, which showcases some of the best projects of design students all around the world. Now, we also play with developing new materials. And in this case, in some of our workshops with some of my colleagues, we develop biomaterials or bioplastics and try different recipes to create these new materials. And on the side, we see some of these applications. And this is a project by our student Amal, who took kombucha and she developed leather, a new type of material grown from this kombucha, from the fungus. And that's the brown patch that you can see in this garment. So that's a bit of some of the projects that we're developing here in DIDI that follow this idea or this philosophy of biomimicry, innovation inspired by nature, and blending biological elements with technological elements to be able also to develop new materials, and always with the aim of sustainability or a respect for the environment. And that's it for today. Thank you very much. And again, we would really, really want to see your bio-inspired designs and your ideas to colonize outer space. So please send a photo of your drawings to razan.almarsuki@didi.ae. And if there's any questions, I would be very happy to answer questions, have a bit of a discussion. Thank you very much. Is there anybody that did a drawing and would like to show it on the camera?
I won't. I can.
Okay, let me see. I'm opening the windows. Who are you? Who is it? Adiraj?
Adiraj. Yes.
Okay, Adiraj. Yeah. We're looking at the. Oh, tell us a bit about it. That looks very, very cool.
It's like you could see like people flying in, like, they show in Marvel movies, right? The Falcon. So we can use that in space. Like the Falcon wings. We can use Falcon wings to fly in space, and then if any meteors are coming, so we can use a net to grab them, like a spider net. And then you can see ships flying. And then the buildings architecture is like triangles and domes.
Wow, that's amazing. Those are some really great drawings and really great ideas.
So may I show my drawing?
Yes, please. Thank you, Adiraj. And please take a picture or scan the drawings, and if you can send them to Razan, we would love to collect some of these drawings. Yes, Devishi, can you put your drawings closer to the camera and explain to us what you did?
So in this drawing, there are going to be 6 cells, which are basically testing laboratories in which scientists from all around the world would be living and researching on themselves and the equipment. Are they able to adapt to the gravity and stuff like that? And the one which you see over here, this is one of the clothes which they are going to be testing if it can stand all the asteroids and meteorites in space. So that cloth is basically the Wolverine material cloth. So it's like if any asteroid or meteorite hits it, it will hit it through. There will be a hole in it, but it's a self-repair cloth. So it's going to repair itself and then come back to its original position.
Self-repairing cloths. Fantastic. Thank you, Devishi. Very interesting, very creative. Somebody else wants to? Somebody else wants to share their ideas and their designs? Or are there any questions? Okay, well, I think that if there's no questions and nobody else will share their drawings, I think that will be it for today. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending our workshop. Make sure you check the list of all the other workshops that we have at DIDI during the summer, and any further information about what we do in DIDI, our courses, please write to Razan. And again, we would really love if some of you can take pictures and send them by email to Razan. Yes?
Oh, yeah. Will there be another workshop today, since I received an email that there will be another workshop at 3 today?
Yes, there's going to be another workshop today. It's the Islamic geometric pattern. So if you didn't attend the one last week, you can attend it today. And we also have more workshops coming up after Eid. So any questions, anything else you want to know, you can send us an email through my email address that's on the screen.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Alrighty, so I guess if there are no more questions, thank you everyone for attending, and we hope to see you in our next workshops. Thank you, Carlos.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Razan, for organizing.
Goodbye.
Actually, it's Razan's birthday today, so whoever wants to sing happy birthday and join me for a virtual happy birthday singing, that would be fantastic.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday to you. Woo. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
You're welcome.